Hello, my loves, and welcome back to Strange Playgrounds. And apologies, I do have a little bit of a summer cold, so I may be spluttering and sniffing throughout this. I was thinking recently, I've been watching a lot of ideological stuff online at the moment and doing a lot of reading about so many different subjects. But one of the things that fascinates me about the way our discourses operate at the moment, certainly in the English speaking world, and certainly narrowing it down further in the UK, is how aesthetics rules all. We operate in aesthetic cultures, by which I mean that we are more concerned with the appearances of things than the essence of them. We're more concerned with the way things look and feel and sound than what they actually mean. And that's a real problem. It's a real problem. It's particularly a problem in our politics and our news media and our discourses on certain issues because we have got to a point where collectively, generally speaking, we seem to lack the ability to discern between what feels correct, what seems correct, and what actually is. We assume that people who speak well, who are articulate and eloquent, are automatically correct because they sound right. There's something very primal and evolutionary in our essence, in ourselves, that responds to people who are well spoken, who are articulate, who are passionate. And as a result of that, you get demagogues rising to the surface. People who don't actually speak truth, people who don't actually say anything of sense or of substance or of meaning, but who sound correct, who are good at stoking that internal fire. Because our brains twinge when we hear people who accord with ourselves, who appeal to our biases, who reinforce us in our particular conditions. And all of us are prey to this, by the way. Every single one of us is prey to this. We're seeing it in the UK now. We've got a new Labour government, and we've got people who I would ostensibly be allies with celebrating that. And I don't understand why. The reason I don't understand why is when you look at what this Labour government has proposed, what it's already started to do, the people that it includes, and the views that they vouchsafe, it is functionally very little different from the previous Tory government. Ideologically and functionally, it's very much the same. So the same problems, the same corruptions are still there. They are not, they may even slow the descent. It may become a controlled descent instead of a chaotic nosedive, but it is still ultimately going to be the same descent into the same crash, right? To the same destination. Um, because all the factors are the same. But because they speak differently, because they are more eloquent, because they appeal to a particular language, a particular coded language, somehow they are better, even though all of the actual evidence points to otherwise. All of the actual, when you look at what they actually do, what they've vouchsafed in the past, what they've done in the past, there is functionally very little difference. Very little difference. They may even pay lip service to left wing or socialist ideals every now and then. But what tends to happen is they become apologetic. They will do the same things that the right wing does, that the Tories do. They will sustain the same state of decay, but they'll apologize about it. They will quibble about it. They will say things like, "Oh, well, there's not enough money to do this. The Tories have left us with such a deficit." But then you look at what they're doing, and there's more than enough money to, for example, cut taxes or maintain particular tax cuts for the rich or for particular corporations. That's just fine. But we can't find enough money to, for example, cut the two-child cap on benefits. When every study, every actual study and every bit of evidence demonstrates that the families that need those benefits the most have more than two children, right? It's madness. It's a very good example of how we are tribalistically conditioned, how we look at aesthetics. We look at, like, so now instead of the neoliberal government having blue ties, they've got red ties, so that must mean they're good, right? No, no. This Labour government is functionally as bad, as corrosive as the Tories were. They're doing pretty much all the same things. They're maintaining all of the same destructive ideologies and policies that the Tories did. But the sense of relief that people are feeling, the oh, it's going to get better now feeling, it's totally aesthetic. It's got nothing to do with reality. Because the reality is we are on that descent into fascism. What's going to happen with this Labour government is, if it carries on with the course that it has, without some kind of radical ideological internal shift or schism, what's going to happen is the same status quo will continue, and therefore the same state of decay will continue. People's lives will not improve enough. They will not improve enough significantly or fastly enough for people to maintain faith in this Labour government. They will therefore feel betrayed. You'll get more people who are radicalized, who will turn to the vacuum of politics. And what they will find there is what you always find in an ideological vacuum. You will find the likes of Nigel Farage, Tommy Robinson, you'll find the extremists, you'll find the fascists, you'll find these people who provide no answers at all. No answers at all, but provide the illusion of an answer. That scapegoating answer, which is it's all the fault of this particular demographic that they don't even sincerely hate. They're just using it as an example, as a manipulative tool. That's all they're doing. They're interested in power. They're interested in dominion. It doesn't matter what demographic it is. It changes with the wind. It changes from one moment to the other. It's trans people at the moment. My trans brothers and sisters are currently the scapegoats du jour in the face of every inch of actual study, evidence, medical science, social science. My trans brothers and sisters are being targeted as these monsters and this social contagion, this disease. And again, it's entirely aesthetic. excuse, excuse me. The people who are targeting them have no expertise at all. You've got some has-been hack children's author who is an expert in nothing, an expert in absolute nothing. You've got certain MPs who, again, are experts in nothing, who are actively being told by medical establishments, psychological establishments, charities, doctors, nurses that they're wrong. Across the board, they're wrong. They are completely wrong. But it doesn't matter because people will listen to them. They have the platform, they have the aesthetic appeal, and that's it. That's all that matters. That's all that matters. If you can appeal to people in terms of their bestial biases, if you can make people feel as though they are justified or correct in their positions, then that's it. It's the feeling that matters. It is not fact. It is not the meaning. It is not the actual substance of the thing. I mean, you can see this across the board, the political spectrum. Over in the US, you've got Trump. Now, don't get me wrong, this is no. Actually, you can see it with both of the candidates, but quite frankly. I mean, Trump is way worse. Trump is way, way worse. Trump is a fascist. Trump is an actual fascist and is the next Hitler. He actually is, outside of any exaggeration or hyperbole. He actually is the rise of the fourth Reich. That's what's going to surface in the US over the next couple of years. Um, Biden, what you see with Biden, and you see it with the Democrats across the board, is that because he is a Democrat and because he uses the language, people assume that he's of the left, that he supports socialist agendas. He doesn't. He never has. Biden is responsible for supporting and maintaining one of the most racist, massively destructive policies that's ever been inflicted on the US peoples, and that is the war on drugs. The war on drugs, which Biden has promoted and championed throughout his political career. Now, that policy has resulted in the desolation of the entire communities, and also, by the way, the disproportionate jailing of black communities and Hispanic communities and basically anyone who isn't white. It's a hideous thing. And not only that, he's to the right of center on many, 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 many issues. That's just the tip of the iceberg. He has never been a friend to the left or to any kind of socialist agenda. But there are people who will apologize for him and who will champion him as though he's some, I don't know, some sort of political solution to the problems that the US is facing. He is not. He is not. He is status quo. All he represents is some degree of stability and sanity. That's it. Again, the decay is still there. The decay is still there. The rot is fundamental. And he and his agendas are not going to stop it. With regards to Trump, he is a classic demagogue. He's a classic demagogue. He doesn't even say anything. If you bother to stop and listen to his actual rallies and his speeches and whatnot, he literally says nothing. Nothing of substance. There's no ideas. There's no solutions. There's no consideration. There's no even halfway coherent point. But what he does do is what demagogues and cult leaders do. He uses the right tone, the right emphasis, the right buzzwords and dog whistles to rile up a base that are already conditioned to respond to them. It's entirely Pavlovian. It's entirely Pavlovian, and he knows what he's doing with it. Or people behind him know what he's doing with it. The people who are sort of controlling him know what he's doing with it and know that he can do it. He's become like the figurehead, the mascot for that particular movement in the US, which is entirely fascist, by the way. It's entirely fascist. They want dominion. They want their political enemy. That's ultimately what it is. It's a kind of cult ritual. They think by making the right propitiations, by emulating him in the right ways and making the right ceremonies and rites, that he will smite their scapegoats, their political and ideological enemies, the liberals, the queers, the blacks, whatever their enemy, the feminists, whatever, their particular tribal enemy. That's what they think. What they don't, I mean, this is a complex issue as well. Some of them actually do understand that he is not going to make things better for them. He doesn't give a shit about them. I mean, he is born to privilege. He is tough. He's an American equivalent of an aristocrat. He's born to privilege. Destroyed every company he's ever touched. By the way, he's a miserable business person. Um, but he will make life harder for their political enemies, for their ideological enemies, and a lot of them don't care that he may even in the same process make life harder for them. They don't actually care about that. What they care about is that their enemies are ground into the dirt. That's more important to them. That's another problem here, by the way. That they're not just stupid. A lot of them are. A lot of them actually are stupid and they believe him. And that's, again, as a result of that aesthetic response, as a result of that tribal, primal response where it feels correct to them, so therefore it must be correct, right? It feels like it's true, therefore it must be true. Yeah? It's the aesthetic response. There's no analysis that takes place there. They are satisfied with the feeling, and that's it. But there's another swathe of them, which is actually quite significant, that knows it's not true on some level, and knows that he doesn't represent them, that he's not going to make life better for them. But the fact that he's making life worse for whatever tribal enemy they have of the moment, that's what's important. They are sincerely bad people. They are sincerely bad people. They don't care that Trump's election will send the US into a nosedive of fascistic misery, that the life of their children and their grandchildren will be way worse as a result of Trump's election. They don't care about that. You saw it here in the UK with Brexit, right? No one with children or grandchildren went to those polls who were voting in favour of Brexit thinking, oh, this will make the life of my children and grandchildren better. This is a good decision. None of them did. Not one went to those polls thinking that. What they went thinking was, this'll show them in Europe, this'll show them in Brussels, this'll show them liberals, this'll show them blah blah blah. That's what they were thinking. It was an act of self-sabotage and of sabotage of us, of of the younger generations, knowingly, absolutely knowingly. Um, we live in, I mean, just as a an aside, we in the UK live in a paedophobic culture. That is a culture that hates its children, and we always have. We always have. You will struggle to find a culture in Europe that hates its children as much as the UK does, um, and that treats them. But it's related to the main point. The reason this culture hates its children is because it regards them in aesthetic terms. Children in this culture are lifestyle ornaments. That's what they are. People don't think about why they have them. They don't think about the consequences of it because they thought about the consequences, they likely wouldn't. If they thought about, am I good enough? That's the other thing, right? I can't think of a greater display of arrogance than having children. I really can't. I actually can't think of a greater display of utter abandon and arrogance than having children. You are saying you are good enough to shape a consciousness. That not only that, but you have the right to do it. You have the right to inflict consciousness upon an entity, upon a being. Um, and and also by extension saying that you are so good at what you're doing that you will make life for that consciousness the best it can be. And we see that that's not the case. We see that that's not the case. People in this culture have children for lots of different reasons, but they are every single reason is selfish. Every single reason is self-interested. It's about not feeling fulfilled. It's about peer pressure. It's about cultural pressure. It's about that notion that if you don't have children at a particular age, particularly for women, then you are somehow worthless. Um, they are lifestyle ornaments. They are lifestyle extensions. And there's a whole raft of complexity related to class and all sorts of things that goes with that. What you see is when children are young, when they're controllable, and when they are cute and they are aesthetic, they are extensions of the family and therefore of the self, then they're lovely. Then all attention is lavished on them. But the minute they step out of line, the minute they step out of line, that's it, they are worthless because they're not fulfilling the need. They're not fulfilling the narcissistic upper middle need of being that lifestyle ornament, right? They're not feeding the sense of self, which is why teenagers and adolescents in this culture, there's no space for them at all. They are scum in this culture. They are scum. And and what I love about that application is that when they act like that, we reprimand them for it. We don't make any space for them. We don't allow anything for them. The minute they stop being aesthetically pleasing, the minute they start being their own entities, the minute they start having their own moods and their own problems and their own complexities, that's it. They're out. They are scum and they are hateful. And it's, oh, teenagers, blah, blah, blah. Oh, we do that. We create that circumstance, but we then punish them for it. And a part of them knows that. That's why we have such a problem with like teenage violence in this culture, with social problems with teenagers in this culture, because there's nothing for them. There's no space for them, not in the family, not in culture, not out of the family. And they know on some level, even if they can't articulate it, they know on some level that they're the rejects, right? They're not cute anymore, they're not controllable anymore, they have their own problems and their own complexities, which were not part of what their parents wanted from them. Their parents largely never considered this. They never realized, even though they went through it themselves, they never thought about, oh, this person, this consciousness is going to become as complex as I am at some point and is going to have its own raft of issues and problems. I don't want that. That's not part of the deal insofar as I'm concerned. So the minute they turn that age, that's it. They're done. They're out. Especially if they have problems, which in this culture we almost universally fucking do. I can tell you that. I mean, oh God, I'm 40 and I've only just about started to get over the incredible problems I had when I was a teenager. I mean, like looking back on them, I wasn't even the worst. My God, compared to some, I was lucky. But my God, the problems I had as a teenager and through my 20s, by the way, they're still there. They're still there. And you know what made them worse? The fact that there's no help. It's the fact that you are condemned for them rather than having them identified. I had this in my family. If you have a problem at that age, if you don't like what's going on at school, if you are emotionally unstable, you are punished for it. You are punished for it because you are being imperfect. You are not fulfilling the aesthetic narrative of what a child is supposed to be, which is an ornament, which is a toy, which is a reflection of what the parent wants. Yeah? And therefore, you're a problem. You are something to be dismissed or to be suppressed or to be gotten rid of in some extreme cases, right? It's a real issue, this problem with aesthetics, and it sickens me. I can see it. I mean, you can see it. I mean, I think being going to university helped, definitely. Doing one of the arts and humanities helped. Doing English literature as I did helped because doing those courses gives you the tools to see narrative. It gives you the tools to identify and dissect the aesthetics that are enshrined and that are imposed upon you. You can see narrative for what it is, for the aesthetic exercise that it is, and you can sort of pick it apart and you can look underneath to see what's driving it. And that helped. But also being queer, being an outsider, being imaginative. Oh my fucking God, that's the key. Having an imagination that's fed and that's nurtured, either like culture, like within the environment that you're in, or just because of your own pursuits, that helps. Because the moment you have that, you can see, you can perceive when something is aesthetic, when it doesn't really mean anything, and when there's something when what it's masking is bubbling away underneath. It's a real problem in UK culture across the board. I just used children and family dynamics as an example, and politics as an example, but it's a problem, it's a disease in every aspect of our culture. And I don't know what the answers are to undoing it or combating it, other than feed the imagination, read widely, um, read critical theory, get the books on critical theory, look at try exercise it, look at what's being told to you, look at the narratives that are being told to you, look at the aesthetics that are being enshrined and imposed, and try to work out why. What agendas are they serving? And how can you combat them in your own life? Like when you experience something that feels right, go and examine it a bit further. And you may find that it is correct. The reason you may find that the reason it feels correct is because it accords, because it makes sense. On the other hand, you may find that it's just appealing to something base and tribal and bestial in you. Also, don't trust demagogues. Don't trust people who are, stand on podiums or engage in debates and all that bullshit and seem to be correct. Don't trust them. Don't enshrine them. Because 9 times out of 10, you'll find they have feet of clay, I'm afraid.